Hey everybody, welcome to Panama Teak Forestry. This is our annual meeting. We've opened it up this year to a lot of non-members. It's actually officially our annual meeting, and we wanted to introduce a lot of people to what we're doing and how we're doing it so they can learn more about teak investments, the company, Panama timber opportunities. Most of that's going to be presented by Grant. He's our current treasurer. We're going to actually re-elect him in the annual meeting part for the people who are actually currently shareholders. So we have a little bit of business to start with. A couple questions on our group, because there's a number of people here that we don't know. How many people know anything about timber? How many people here are from Panama or know Panama, live here part of your time? Okay, we got a number of those. That's great. How many people have never been to Panama? This is like completely new to them.
Just a little bit louder.
Okay. To start our meeting, we go over briefly on accounting for last year. We post all of our accounting on the internet for our members. There's the password you get in. It has our financials, so everybody who is a shareholder can look on the internet. We post quarterly accounting records. This year, we've been growing the company for 7 years now, which means we spend more money than we earn. This year, we're probably looking at going into positive cash flow. We've got over 500 hectares of teak growing. We're getting 12, 14, actually 15-year-old teak now. And we've got a mill up and running. And we've got some opportunities where we're starting to harvest other people's wood. We're FSC certified. This year, our gross income was actually $340,000 about. A lot of that, we have the visa program where we sell visas. And we did a number of that. We also sell some cows. We sold some wood. And we manage plantations for some other companies. We have a Swedish company that we manage for, and we get some management fees from that. Our total expenses were about $513,000, which means we spent more than we earned. But that's because we're growing. We planted another 30 hectares of land. We spent a lot on developing the mill and that side of the business to capitalize on the wood that we have that we'll be harvesting and from other plantations. The difference came from basically investors. We bring investors in that allows us to grow. That's about where we stand. We got about $40,000 in cash reserves. We have about $150,000 of wood that's cut and sitting at the mill that we'll be kiln drying and selling shortly. That's the quickie on the financials of the company. The election of Grant. Grant is our treasurer. Grant, you want to say a quick hi?
Yeah, I'm Grant Glessing. I'm from Canada, and I formed this company with Jack and Jeff back in 2005. I basically was trained as a forester in British Columbia and also in Oregon State University in the U.S. And I work for a timber company in Canada, and I look after about 160,000 hectares of reforestation for that company. And I like doing teak on the side because it's a lot of fun.
Okay. And he's been the treasurer for the first round. Jack is our secretary, and I'm the president. And we do, every 2 years, we elect one of the officers so that we keep continuity if anybody didn't get elected. So basically, for the shareholders, if you're all for electing Grant, say aye. Aye. Is there anybody who's against electing Grant? No. I think that actually puts Grant in for another 5 years, and then we'll rotate.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Yeah. He works. We make him work. We make everybody work. Even investors who aren't involved in the company have to work. We are going to then turn it over to Grant because he has a great presentation on timber, teak, and what we're doing going forward. Thank you.
So, welcome everyone to our 2013 conference. Tonight, what we're going to talk about. Kind of breaking this discussion up tonight, presentation, in two separate sections. We really have a 50,000-foot level about tropical timbers, tropical timber investing from a larger scale, and then I'm going to move us to our accomplishments with Panama Teak over the past year. And looking forward to 2013, and kind of wrapping it up because we have a lot of new people here tonight, and I want to express to you why we believe Panama Teak Forestry is a really good value proposition as an investment. Just a little bit of background, because we're asking how much has been around the timber investment world. Timber really is, I believe, the ultimate investment. There's a couple of drawbacks to it for length of time for your investment, because trees take a long time to grow. But really, it gives you the better than most, if not all, asset classes that are available in the market. It pretty well outperforms stocks, bonds, you name it. It pretty well does it. It equalizes your portfolio. It moves counter-cyclically to stocks and bonds. More importantly, it is an inflation protector. It really takes the trees, it grows with them, it protects you in case of future inflation that may come. And that is somewhat a concern, I think, in the world today with the amount of dollars that are being printed. Of course, you feel good about your investment because it is green. You're growing something, it is sustainable, it's a beautiful product. There's over 10,000 uses of wood out there. So you know that when you grow this wood, there's a lot of things that can be made from it. And finally, the most important thing is trees still grow in a recession. No one told them after 2008. We actually went back and checked last week, and they grew through 2008. They didn't get scared and shut down. Just looking a little bit, I threw this one graph up here, and this is kind of professors were saying, well, what determines the value of timberland returns? Well, really, when you look at it, 61% of the time in this study, it was based on biological growth. So as long as you get your trees growing really well and continue on, you'll do really well on your investment. 33% of your return is based at the time that you sold the timber. Did you time it at the height of the market or the bottom? It doesn't make up as big of a return as most people think. Finally, 6% of your return is based on your land appreciation. Obviously, land appreciates, but it doesn't make up a huge amount of your return on your investment in timberlands. One thing I'll say also is if you have any points of clarification, stop me. There are a lot of acronyms. As a timber person, we talk in this weird language, and we assume everyone knows it. So stop me for points of clarification. Otherwise, if you have a question, more detailed question, at the end of this presentation, both Jack, Jeff, and myself are happy to answer anything that may come. Okay? So to start with, when we talk about tropical hardwoods, we have to clarify, what do we actually mean? So here's a map that really shows a number of colors. Obviously, there's not a lot of forests or consumers in this gray area. The blue color is the consumers of the world. These people, especially Canadians and Americans, we use a lot of hardwoods. This is the consuming nations. The green color is the producers. There's two shades of green, and actually you can kind of see it there. The light green are actually countries that really don't report their numbers. So it's really hard to get a total picture on how much they're producing. There are estimates, but it's really the dark green countries here are reporting their numbers, and we have a really good handle on what is actually being produced. Finally, just as a point of clarification, we are only talking about forests that are between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. So if we look at the world demand for timber, there is a strong correlation between the world population and the wood demand. We know from a number of calculations that have done over many years that on average, the average person in the world consumes 0.54 cubic meters per person per year. This comes from Wink Sutton, who is a professor in New Zealand, and he studied that over a 50-year period, and it's actually quite stable. It's gone from 0.6 to 0.54. It's been actually fairly consistent. Now, when we look at this 0.54 and we look at our total wood demand, this is the actual billions of cubic meters in the whole world that we need for wood. We're looking at almost 3.7 billion cubic meters of total wood. That's everything, including pulp and paper and hardwoods and everything that's out there. And then you have to remember that almost half of that wood is actually for heating, for sustenance. So half of that wood is actually used for everyday life, whereas the wood that we're talking about is actual tropical wood demand where you actually use it for commercial purposes, veneers, lumber, furniture, other products that kind of come out of that forest. And there is a very strong correlation, about 3.5%. So we can tell as the world becomes more populated, our demand it's a pretty solid number going forward. This kind of looks at the volume that was produced over the last 15 years from 3 different areas of the world. The blue is Africa. These are millions of cubic meters right here. They're producing about 20 million cubic meters. Latin America, 31, 32 million. And Asia Pacific region, we're probably about 82 million cubic meters. So if you add all those numbers up, the total production is about 138 million cubic meters. One thing that you'll know with this graph is it's pretty well flat. It hasn't moved in a direction up or down. It tends to have gone pretty well sideways. So that to me indicates it must be hard to find wood then, because obviously the demand keeps going up, but you're not finding it. What we've seen is the real price increasing in various products. So if we look at sawnwood in Latin America, it has increased above inflation 3.5%, whereas real price increases on African and Asian logs have increased 5% per year. Over the past 10 years, the real price increase of teak has increased at an annual rate of 5.5% above inflation. It's being obviously out there, and it keeps increasing in value, which is a good thing as an investor of teak. This slide I got from Marissa Meislich, who's with New Forest Advisory. I bumped into her in Portland, Oregon at a conference, and the concept is that really natural forests are being revalued by society. We're seeing this happen on a very large global basis. We're seeing that, currently deforestation is accounting for nearly 20 to 25% of greenhouse gas emissions. And as that occurs, we have to find new ways to value and monetize the forest in order to protect it. Biodiversity, conservation, catchment and water, carbon credits, renewable energy. Let me give you an example. Catchment and water. The Panama Canal. It's worth a lot of money for the trade through Panama and for the world. If we decided to start clear-cutting the forest within the canal zone, and we had a whole pile of water issues and sediment and blockages and such, well, the value is going to be impacting someone else. What we know is that as time goes on, over the next decade, by protecting those forests, they're worth more. They're worth more to all the communities around them. One initiative, the RED Plus initiative, is the reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation. A very large program. Most of these countries that I showed you in dark green, and they're looking to basically protect their remaining natural forests in exchange for hard currency, and that's done through the World Bank. There's going to be more pressures on forests to produce wood and volume for people. It's just that simple. And the value for carbon, renewable energy, and the watershed values that we take as being free are going to be worth more. One more term I'll define. I should have done that a little bit earlier. Ecosystem assets. It's really the goods and services provided by healthy, functioning ecosystems that are generally unpriced and therefore have traditionally been overused or exploited. And examples would be soil, water, medicine values, biological diversity.
And Grant, you're saying the value of a natural forest.
These are natural forests, right. Yes.
And then the plantation basically will alleviate.
They can help alleviate that, but it helps. The pressure is mounting on the prices because if you're taking more natural forests out of production, it's going to become more valuable for plantations. So basically, high-grade tropical timbers from natural forests are in decline. If you look at the ITO, the International Tropical Timber Organization's report from 2011, you'll note that the productivity from natural forests in the tropics is only 0.32. And I think most people assume under good management that 1 cubic meter per hectare should be achievable. But the facts do not prove that out. In fact, there's only 5 countries in the tropics that can report a harvest greater than 1 cubic meter per hectare per year. And those are Ghana, Nigeria, Malaysia, Thailand, and Togo. And basically, a lot of that wood is probably coming from plantations, but they might be saying that they're coming from, quote, natural forests. So there really is, the majority of the world is not achieving the output that everyone assumed would occur. You know, that's definitely playing a part in the world. I'll give you a case study. If you look at Myanmar, which it really is Burma, so some people know it as Burma, other people know it as Myanmar. Basically, 47% of the world's natural teak forests are found there. But over the last 20 years, they have really degraded their forests. You know, if you look at the overview of Myanmar in 2011, they stated that what their annual allowable cut, what they actually could do sustainably, what would they project, what the country should be cutting. That's what they need to be doing. But you know what they're doing? This is the estimate of what they're actually doing through illegal logging, what's actually getting taken off the forest. So obviously not a sustainable situation. Well, just newsflash, this week Myanmar has just announced a total ban on log exports starting in April of 2014. They are one of the biggest players, or the biggest natural teak producer in the world. So that's going to have some big significant on the teak market going forward. Now, if we look at area, the global tropical forest area, and again, bear with me, I'm going to go through a few terms. What is a tropical forest? Well, there's actually a definition, and that is land spanning more than ½ a hectare with trees taller than 5 meters and a canopy cover greater than 10%, or the ability to reach these thresholds. That's the starting point. And, you know, so there's a whole pile of potential area. So if you're looking at, it's really in billions, 1.664 billion hectares, you know, you start with in the total area category. And then you get into this other term called permanent forest estate. And that is land, whether public or private, secured by law and kept under permanent forest cover. This includes land for the production of timber and other forest products, for the protection of soil and water, and for the conservation of biological diversity. So you can say that when we actually look at the tropical permanent forest estate, you know, a lot of that fragmented forest gets discarded, you know, down to 783 million hectares of potential land. Now from there, if you look at what is totally protected, either in parks, reserves, totally off limits for any timber extraction, there's 358 million hectares that is totally set aside, taken out of the world. The actual productive forest estate from natural sources is 403 million hectares of natural and 22 million of planted forests. By and large, most of the forests are still natural forests in the world. It's really a small amount that is actually being produced from plantations. Now, if you further break the plantation number down from 22 million all the way down to 4.3 million hectares is the amount of teak. That's the best estimate that's out there in the entire world. So we start at 1.6 billion and we get down to 4.3 million hectares of teak. So really, from here all the way down to here. Now we break that down a little bit further and we start saying, well, okay, whereabouts are the teak plantations in the world? Well, there's a few things that you'll note. Like there's 3 big plantation teak countries. We have India, by and far the largest, and this is in millions of hectares. So 1.66 million hectares of teak plantations. We have Indonesia, 1.2. And we have Myanmar. The best estimate that we have is about 390,000 hectares. You know, those are the big 3. And then after that, we have a toss-up. I mean, I put Panama here in red. We have about 55,000 hectares of teak in this country. Now, if you look at that, also, how old are these plantations? They are relatively very young. 77% of these plantations are less than 20 years of age. There's 18% is estimated to be between 21 and 40 years of age, and there's only 5% that are greater than 40 years in age. The whole world has very young plantations. They're not rapidly producing, and there isn't a lot of them out there. In fact, one of the papers I was reading was trying to estimate how could we meet the reduction in the future from the natural forest decline over the next number of years, and how many hectares of plantations would we need to establish by 2050 in order to meet that shortfall. And the number that was bandied about was 10 million hectares. We need to actually establish 10 million hectares to meet the future demand because of the reductions of the natural forests. So I think the teak really, you know, we're talking a pyramid, and we're almost at the absolute top of the amount of these top quality hardwoods in the world. Michael?
How would you rate the quality of management, like say the two big players of Indonesia?
I would say that they're basic plantations, and they probably have a wide range of expectations between, you know, really poor and really good. But you have to remember also that in India, the plantations are on longer rotations. You know, they're more in 40 to 50-year rotations over there. So the relative productivity is going to be lower. Just a couple other comments about Panama. There's about 71,000 total hectares of plantations in Panama. 55,000 is estimated to be in teak, but there's other species. And before 1990, the species of choice was Caribbean pine. So you see a lot of these older pine stands in Panama, and there's also mahogany and a few others. But by and large, the plantations are teak in this country. The size of Panama, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is 7.7 million hectares. So there's approximately about 1.2 million hectares that could be available for plantations, total plantations. But for teak, the way teak grows, you really need to look for land on the Pacific side of the Continental Divide. You need a certain rainfall, 2 to 3 meters per year. You need basically a warm, very hot climate, very close to the ocean, a lower elevation type of land. Soils that are sandy, pH that is in a range of 6 to 7. Everyone thinks that every piece of hectare can be grown. And there's still a sizable amount that we can find for teak. But really, when you look at the world, you understand that teak grows best within 10 degrees latitude of the equator. You know, we're looking for just a toothpick in this room that's full of toothpicks. We're getting very little land that we could actually grow teak on.
Greg, did you want to mention of the hectares that are planted in a lot of these countries, they're not low quality?
You know, we've tried when we started this company to buy existing plantations. We thought, someone's done the work, we can decide which ones are the best, and then purchase those plantations and bring them into the company. But we had a really hard time after the first one or two. The quality of the teak is not there. In fact, if you look at this number, quality of maintenance, probably I would say 70% of those stands are absolute junk. They have been mismanaged. They sometimes have been cut. They've been thinned with all the biggest trees first, because the log buyers had told them, you sell me those big trees and I'll give you more for them. You can let those small trees grow up. Most people don't realize in any forest, genetically, those trees that are your winners will always be your winners. If you eliminate your best trees from any thinning, you'll never catch up. So you really need to take out those poor quality trees. And so I can't comment on India as much. I wish I could. It's hard to get a real feel. But if it's any indication to Panama, there's probably some of these are really questionable. How much is there? and whether it will even make it beyond 10, 12 years of age. They get to a point of economic value and they're harvested. Now, move that down one more notch, and we can kind of look at, we talked about 138 million cubic meters that was part of the total global tropical timber harvest in 2010. And you can see that about 98% of that wood is not teak. In fact, only 2% is teak, or about 2.5 million. There's estimations about 2 million cubic meters of total commercial production. And we have to be a little bit clear on this point, because commercial production is basically final harvest. So thinning volumes are actually not included in that number. They're a byproduct of the final harvest. So the natural teak from Myanmar, which really was the only source in the world, which will be gone by supposedly April 1st, 2014, there isn't a lot of wood. When we started earlier on, we started with 3.7 billion cubic meters of total wood. Now we're down to 2 million. Not billion, but 2 million cubic meters. So that's why we coined the phrase precious woods, like precious metals. You're at the top of the pyramid when we talk about teak. Any questions at this point? Okay. This is the fun part of the talk, because this is when I met Jack and Jeff, and so I'll tell the story. I got to ad-lib a little bit here and just let you know. I invested some forest land in New Zealand, and I came back, and one of my friends said, "Well, geez, you should probably put that in teak. That teak does really well." I said, and I kind of thought about it, and I said, I should just probably double check that and make sure. So I did some internet searches. And I checked out several companies, and I seemed to get this one guy somewhere in Panama that was giving me this message back, and it was this long. And I wasn't sure exactly if this guy was real or not. So I thought, okay, whereabouts are you? Okay, Panama. Where am I? I'm in Canada. Okay. Well, it so happened that I asked Jeff, well, is there any way that we could ever get together? Because we're just emailing back and forth. And it so happened that year that Jeff was going back to visit his family in Washington State. And it so happened that year that I was going to my wife's family's in Washington State. By and hold, the town that they were apart was 1 hour drive. So we kind of picked more of a middle point, kind of on that side of the divide. And it was this little restaurant called Barney's Junction, basically across the bridge, and this is where we kind of held the first meeting. At that point, Jeff brought his friend from high school, Jack McCotter, and we sat down and we started talking. And the first thing that I noted was, first of all, this guy is real, and I knew that within the first half hour to an hour, it was so dynamic. We had talked about, wow, we should actually start a company. We should start a forest industry down in Panama. No, we should actually grow all the logs, and then we should make lumber, and then we should make furniture. And we had all these ideas that we're all going over, and I came away with that and saying, okay, this sounds exciting. So we kind of made a pact, and Jeff and Jack went back to Panama, and they did all the grunt work. They went around and looked at 30, 40 different plantations. And then I got that phone call in late February, early March. And it was, Grant, we found the perfect plantation. If you want in, you better get your ass down here. So I got a plane ticket, and I was really hoping they'd pick me up at the airport, and they did. And we went out, and we formed the company. It was all done within about a week. We basically came back to Jeff's apartment, and we developed the bylaws. We had a template, but we had to actually go through and put some meat to what kind of company do we want? How is this going to work? Is this just going to be us, or is it going to be a partnership, a company? There was a lot of things we worked through. So we kind of worked on the company concept, and then I went back to Canada. I told actually 7 people about these phenomenal guys and the phenomenal opportunity that was presenting itself. And of those 7 people, 6 people invested with us to begin with, and were our angel investors. And from there, we were able to buy the first plantation, and each year we've grown. But I can tell you, the amount of entrepreneurial capability, energy, you could sense it, and you knew that you had to get in. And that's why I just took this leap of faith. Here's this Canadian guy that's, he doesn't really like to ride horses and things, and he's actually going to go down and form this timber company in Panama. Wow, for me it was a big step, and that's how we formed the company. But one of the things we've always said, we had a strong vision. We needed to create the raw resource from the beginning. We thought that we could do it by buying up the existing plantation, like the first one we bought. We did a little bit of that, but then we realized that most of them had been clear-cut, they were in horrible condition, and we realized we had to start planting our own forests. We had a vision, and we're on the same path, but it's changed somewhat from what we thought we could do. The final one is we structured a number of bylaws right from the start that we thought would help put the company on a different path than a lot of these other teak promotion companies that basically were getting paid by just selling the shares, promoting it, taking it right off the top and giving it to themselves. And we thought, let's do something a little different. Let's not actually take a salary. We're investors. Let's try a new approach. I'll still work for the timber company in Canada. Jeff, you got so many other businesses, and same with Jack. Well, you guys can kind of work on these other things and get an income. But the whole objective was, right from the start, it wasn't a company as much as it was a coalition of investors that came together rather than a traditional company. And we had a number of people that we just asked to help write things for the website. We had a number of people to research what to plant in a wet area. We used our network of people to work together kind of as a coalition of investors rather than to pay ourselves. So if you look at the bylaws, give you a couple examples. The board of directors agreed that the president of the corporation should receive a management fee. This fee is not in salary. Instead, he will receive 1 share for each 10 shares sold. We thought that was a good motivator. We can sell the shares, raise the capital, build the plantations, and we're not going to pay you a salary.
I might comment, that's actually under my direction, so that gets distributed. He actually gets a lot of it because he works really hard. I've had other people who help raise shares and do stuff, but we've said, okay, well, if you bring the investors, I'll give you a percentage of that. So that's the total incentive we have to raise money and the total amount we can devote to raising money.
Yeah, it's all inclusive. So I liked it. A lot of people that invested with us or have invested with us like that setup, because if the company's worth nothing at the end, we got nothing out of this either. The second one was 7 years, the formation of the corporation or sooner, we're going to try and get 50% distributed back to our shareholders. Now, how that came about, we're trying to decide, okay, we're going to put all this money in, okay, we're going to work for free, we're going to do all these efforts, but when can we start seeing something back? And I wanted to kind of come to an end of a point in time where we could actually get something out of it, because we can't live for free forever. We need to get a return. So we actually picked 7 years, and the reason I did that, from my perspective, back in 2005, we have a mountain pine beetle problem in Canada, and where I work, we'll probably lose 70% of the forest that we're going to harvest. And I knew that in 7 years from back then, my job would have been in question. So I used the 7 years because I needed some cash at that time, is the way my crystal ball presented itself. We are still harvesting the pine beetle in Canada, but we only have probably 2 or 3 good years left. The third one, this was just what we did today. We basically had serve a term of 5 years, and then we just rotate. Once you set these bylaws up, you always have to think about them and say, well, under returning value to shareholders, how can we get money back to our shareholders? And one thing is, we're looking at doing a share repurchase program as cash becomes available. But one thing that we're thinking about, and we're putting this out at this point, is to relook at that one bylaw about the dividends. And the reason we're looking at this is because the world's changed in the last 7 years. We see a little more urgency in the United States of them wanting to find out exactly what you're claiming on your taxes all the time. We're seeing a lot in Canada. There's the question of worldwide incomes. And there's some of our shareholders, they just don't want that headache of the filing and creating, quote, a taxable event. And we're saying, well, maybe there's a different way that we can do it. So at this point, we do have a proposed distribution policy to help better define what net cash flow is. We believe net income after tax might be a more appropriate term. And then to look at, we still have an option to take it in cash, but to also distribute it in a share value appreciation. We have a 3-page draft proposal, and as you know, to change this bylaw, we'll need 80% of our shareholders to agree to it. So at this point, we're just putting it as an idea, and we'll have a copy available.
And a quick comment, what we're changing in the bylaw is not the 50% distribution. We're actually sticking with the 50% distribution, but it says the 50% distribution as a dividend. And a dividend is not necessarily a tax-friendly way to distribute money. As we've learned a lot about corporations, we're going, well, there's a number of different ways to distribute the 50%, and as a dividend, that can be a high tax event for a lot of people. So we're going, okay, how do we distribute the 50% and have been discussing it? And we are at that point now where we actually will have cash flow and we will be distributing it. And so it's looking at exactly the mechanism to do that works the best to everybody. So we're just going, a dividend is not necessarily the best word. You can distribute through buyback, you can distribute through a couple of different things that make it so it's a taxable event for the people who want the distribution and not a taxable event for people who don't. We have some investors who go, there's a number of people who've invested through their IRAs and stuff, and people who are really looking long term. They've invested for their grandkids, and they go, I would just put the money back into the teak company. And so you're like, okay, well, if I distribute it, Panama actually has a 10% dividend tax. If they're American, and then they get hit by another tax because they've got an income, and then they buy the shares back. So they lose 30 or 40% of their money is going in a circle. So we're going, okay, how do we avoid that? And that's the part we're actually looking at. We'll still be doing the distribution. It's just how we're doing the distribution, we're looking to structure it so it minimizes the tax.
So this proposal you're working on now might be available in 6 months?
We have it available.
And we're actually people who are financial people are sort of the first people we're showing it to, because we have a number of people who know a lot about taxes and finances that are in the company.
So anyway, we have a copy available. Rather than trying to go through it, we thought we'd present it on the trip. We can discuss further. Thought this might be interesting for a few people. Just kind of looking at who owns Panama Teak Forestry. You can see there's 3 large owners. You probably can guess who those are. Basically, 36% of our shares are held by medium owners. We define that as being 100 to 999 shares. And 14% of the company is held by 56 small owners. So the shares outstanding, you can see there, as of I think the end of December, was 14,864 outstanding. Okay, we're going to get into some interesting numbers. Everyone likes numbers. I was actually able to get out to the plantations last week, and I measure up plantations, and I've been keeping track of how well they've been growing for the last 5 years. We have 109 hectares that are in the age class of between 11 and 17 years, but most of them are 15, and I think we got 66 hectares in 15 and 43 in 11. But what I did was I actually went out and looked at the average size of those logs in each one of those plots, figured out how fast they're growing, the average growth each year. So, it varies quite a bit. So, some of the, 11 years old, 1.1, 0.8 centimeters per year. And some of the older stuff is starting to slow down because teak grows quite rapidly to start with. It has a really growth spurt up to probably year 8. It was when it starts peaking down, and then it keeps ramping down in its growth function. But what we're finding is we actually can take this scale stick, and we can actually measure the diameters of these logs. That it so happens that this was a thinning, and we had them on the ground to kind of prove this out. And we can actually look at all the existing trees that are standing, and we can project a volume that is currently available. So a board foot, which is 12 inches by 12 inches by 1 inch thick, how many boards would be in all those trees? And we can actually make those skinnier. Like one board foot could be actually longer and thinner. We estimate that on some of the 11-year-old plantations, we have 21,000 to 27,000 board feet per hectare. And some of our better plantations, we have up to 48,000 at that point. So if we're just looking at averages, and I like to look at averages rather than trying to look at all the numbers, but what we're finding is on those 109 hectares, currently we have 28,973. So say 29,000. Let's round. I like rounder numbers. So currently, what that number means is if we decided to go and just cut everything, like just cut it all, and we put it all through the sawmill, how many boards would we come up with? Well, the 109 hectares times the 28,000, we have over 3 million board feet of timber as of today. Fairly significant. But where it gets really fun is that if we look at a lot of our average trees, 25 centimeters, or for the imperial people, I guess we could say, 10-inch log is our average log. And we have to project out what's going to happen over the next 10 years because we're about 10 years away from harvesting those trees. Well, you can see at the bottom, and I included this, is that a 10-inch, 8-foot log would give us 30 board feet for that one log. But if over 10 years it grows at 0.5 centimeters, which is 5 centimeters, i.e. 2 inches, that same log we're projecting will have 45 board feet, or about 50% more volume than what we currently have. We're well on track. We're probably going to get more to a 44,000, 45,000 average, which is pretty significant. Any questions on the number of what we're finding in plantations? And again, this is just an average sample. It's my guesstimate. It's the best information we have, but it is showing that we have a lot of teak. 3 million board feet is quite significant.
It's just a question because I learned a little bit about the hardwood and the sapwood, and when you talk about this growth over years, again, just averages, what is the ratio? Is it stay equal as it grows, or?
No, it grows rapidly from the start. It probably peaks at year 8, and then the relative growth is slowing down. So it might be putting 2 centimeters on at year 7, maybe 3.
Actually, I'll rephrase my question.
Okay.
Let's just say if it grows 10%, is that 5% hardwood and 5% sapwood?
You get more percentage of hardwood as the tree gets older.
Okay.
And the tree becomes more valuable.
Basically, the second half of the growth, you have faster dollar growth. The first year, the trees grow the quickest biomass-wise from year 1 to 10, but actually at year 7, your tree is worthless. So it actually has $0 growth between year 1 and 7 or 8. And your value growth starts at year 8 to 10 and then grows. Because a small tree really has no lumber value. Even though your biological growth is a little bit slower, your value growth is actually faster. So if you put the two curves together, your biological growth is curving over, but your value growth is going faster. You actually have to put those two curves together to get your value growth curve totally, and look at when that starts to curve over is more your harvest time. So if the value growth is what you're concerned with for harvest timing and not volume growth. So you're putting on more value, even though it's growing slower, it's putting on a lot more value, a lot faster.
Yeah, and a larger board is going to be worth more. So if you got to an 8-inch board, it's going to be worth more than a 4-inch board, right? Because people, harder to find those kind of sizes.
The other thing you can do with a larger tree, you can do something called quarter sawing. You have to live saw a small tree and live sawing, which is just going straight through the log this way. Quarter sawing, you cut it into quarters and then cut this way across the quarter, which gives you a different graining pattern on the wood, which has actually more value. All of your marine timber is quarter sawed. So if you go into the marine industry, you need quarter sawed teak, which means you need a bigger log. So we're also looking at marketing to maximize our value from some of what.
Hey, what a great segue. Thank you. Because we're talking about increase the amount of dollars we can get from our wood. And, you know, if we start right in at the logs stage, and if we decided to put everything in containers and send it off to India, we could. But really, you're only going to get probably between $1 and $3 a board foot from that process. However, if you can actually manufacture like we have, move it up that value chain, you know, we probably can move that up to $3 to $6 board foot average, and we're talking on average. And again, if we keep working towards furniture, cabinets, we even looked at, for example, a teak picnic table. I think, Jeff, you said 35 board feet. You know, we could wholesale that probably for even at $400, $30, $40 a labor, $400. We could move that up to $10 a board foot by just making some basic products, some other things like that, and flooring. So when we say furniture, it really is value-added products, and we'll probably come up with more that we just don't know about yet. Definitely that's where we need to move. We need to move up this value-added supply chain. We will just keep adding more and more value to our holdings. Yeah, Don.
One on that last slide, with the Panama-U.S. free trade agreement, the tariffs on furniture from Panama dropped to 0. So that used to be a very big barrier, but it's gone. So if eventually we do begin to produce furniture and sell it to the U.S.,
awesome. Time value of money. This was just thrown in as just a concept. We just didn't want to over-predict anything. We don't want to tell people something that's not possible. And we've always projected what we can achieve, the best estimate we can. And so we're working with a 12% return on our teak investment. And so basically, if we start year 0 and we're just basing it on log form, just raw logs, we're saying, well, you know, it's probably going to be on 1 hectare of teak land, about $130,000. And why I put the 15% return in here is that what happens is when you add inflation, and we said earlier that the teak carries the inflation. If you can carry another, you know, that inflation all the way through the growth cycle, you know, you're going to look at about $251,000. And if there's a real price increase that has occurred in the past, we said earlier it was 5.5%. We put that 5% on, then, you know, your numbers go up again to like $729,000. So the numbers in investing really depends on what you're estimating, your inflation, your real price, and we don't have that in our estimates. And the other thing is, the previous slide showed the value chain. Well, we're valuing it more at about a $3 a board foot-ish, given the 44,000 board feet we're projecting. So, you know, you can see the opportunity if we can move up, get to the 5, 6, or even higher. Our share value is going to definitely do a lot better. Just going to touch briefly on our manufacturing facilities. We made a lot of headway this past year with getting a lot of equipment in from the United States. We got a Watkin molder. I think we talked a little bit about that. We touched on it. But we did get inspection reports done on that equipment, and just to make sure that what we're getting was really good. Rod, I think, inspected some of the machinery himself. But for some of the higher end stuff, especially the molder, just want to let the shareholders know that we are doing our due diligence to make sure that everything was in the condition that we thought it was in when we purchased. The reports were You know, the feed roller gear backlash is tight, good condition. I would have to say this machine is in good to very good condition. So we had a number of reports that basically looked at that machinery. You know, we brought quite a bit in, and now we are actually looking at the mill, and the people on the tour tomorrow will find it is kind of pulled apart because we're expanding. We walked in there the other day, hot air blowing. We are drying the teak. We're in production, so that's a good thing. So I'll keep moving on. Oh, here's our brushing crew. How to get a picture of them? It says teak right there. they help us out. They brush. This really is a slide that Jeff should be talking about because he's very passionate about sustainability, about agroforestry. But we have done a lot of things over the years. We've done beans. We've done a tropical peanut mani. We've tried a Mexican tree that fixes nitrogen into the soil, leucaena. We've tried chicken manure, trying to get our organics up in our plantations. We have sheep also. We have a lot of things that we're doing with agroforestry, and we've tried a lot of things. So on the tour, you're going to see some examples of that. Okay, so we're doing good, but last few slides here, and I'll kind of bring home a few highlights. Bringing things together, and I broke it into highlights and challenges. Extraction business, and these two kind of all go together. So let's back up a bit. What we tried to do last year was we tried to enter into a business we call the extraction business. The objective there was to buy up other plantations, compete against the Indian log buyers, but do it in a way where we could actually cut out the middlemen, where we would market directly into India and cut out all those guys that want to take 10, 20% on the way. And we brought in Rod. But basically, Rod was going to come in to run this extraction business for us. But at the same time, when all this was going on, there was kind of this big hiccup that was going on in India. And the rupee basically fell 20% or more. Shipping rates went up at kind of the wrong time. And all of a sudden, this business that we were actually so hopeful for became marginal. It wasn't going to be what we thought for the profit. So at this point, Rod had also brought key personnel with him. Rod's a key person. He also brought in a couple other key guys you'll meet who are running our sawmill and running our operations up in Llano Grande. It's the people that are going to make the difference to get that wood into products and add our value. Part of getting this extraction business was kind of a timber trading partnership where we're looking to send wood into or buy wood and then be able to sell into India, in the United States, Europe. So basically, the timber trading partnership was formed, and that's a good platform going forward. At the same time, we had some major accomplishments that we can't go without recognizing how huge these were. FSC certification, we obtained that this past year. We had a certification audit the first week of January. We passed. We are FSC certified, and that helps to market our wood and gain the market share that we need.
What's FSC?
Forest Stewardship Council. So it's an actual body that basically looks over your forest and says, oh, you guys are legitimate, you're running your business, you meet our standard, and then you get a stamp. So that stamp allows you to sell your product, and your customers know that it came from a sustainably managed forest.
The other thing it also gets us on the mill development. Our mill is also becoming FSC certified. We're like the only FSC certified mill in that area. There's about another 2,000 hectares of teak that has been certified of other plantations, but they have no mill and no intention to build a mill. So we're automatically their number one buyer. They used to be there by selling sold only to the Indian market. And now we've opened up another market to them. if they pass it through a non-FSC mill, they would lose their FSC. Us being the only mill, we can actually capitalize on buying all of the local timber that's FSC certified and running it into the U.S. and European market to get a higher value for it.
Just so you guys know, that this was our 11-year-old plantation in Llano Grande area, so it's pretty nice. 3-phase power to the mill. That was a challenge for us, but we overcame it and we got power in December finally. Really a huge accomplishment that we can finally put that behind us and move on to the next phase. Our Panama Teak Forestry website was recognized on the web and as rated by forestrydegree.net. Jeff started the Facebook page. We're trying to communicate. We're trying to get more avenues for communication, so that was something that we started the past year. And then we did 30 additional hectares of planting. We basically took the wet areas that we didn't think we could put into teak, and we put some into teak, but we put other species, such as Santa Maria, Zapatero, we put in Ruble, an oak, and some cocobolo we mixed in. About 5 different species that we mixed into that wet area. And we also did something a little bit different. We basically tried to decompact. We tried to mix the soil more, put more chicken manure. We made a larger aerated hole. I think that's going to make a difference. We're seeing a really good early growth. And I think once the trees hit the nutrients, off they're going to go. So that was something that we did a little bit different as we're trying to, get our practices better than what they are. I mean, we always got to be looking at doing things better. And I think the 30 hectares are well on their way for success. So what does 2013 look like? Well, we talked about becoming cash flow positive. We're going to set a production target. I mean, we want to achieve 120,000 or so plus board feet of lumber. And the other thing is to begin processing some wood from lake salvage operations. And we haven't touched on it a lot, but there is an opportunity in a lake that was flooded many years ago to be able to salvage some of those tropical timbers. We can buy some to start with, to bring them to our facility, to make sure that we can mill it and do it of a high quality. And then there's some other opportunities that we are definitely looking at. It's very exciting. We're working further with that. I can't say anything more. I'm just excited. Anyway, we'll get Jeff, myself, Jack. We can talk more about that. It's pretty exciting.
Basically, there is easily 25 to 50 million board feet under the lake that is available to be harvested. It's a big opportunity. The wood is there. The profit margin is there. We have the skills and the techniques to do it. It's just a matter of putting it all together and making it happen.
In a nutshell, it's an absolute dream for a sawmill. I mean, sawmills make money if they have raw materials at a decent price. And this is a huge, huge source of logs for a very reasonable price.
And these are tropical logs that you just can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, it's just huge, potentially.
I encourage everybody to get on board for this purpose. And with what we've got here, I promised, I made an agreement a year ago to come and work with these guys. But I told them I would not build a teak mill. I'll build a sawmill. But we need to include, Panama is really a very unique, I'm here in Panama my 3rd time, because there are resources that don't exist in all of these tropical areas that we talked about, like Panama. So 5 years ago I was working with the indigenous Indians, and now 5 years later I'm back. They just received the World Wildlife Federation certification studies. So 5 years I'm back, and that resource, the lake resource is a real pearl. We got this Watkin boulder is a $300,000 item that I found a guy just bought in a big mill, never used it. $300,000 what we paid, 19 grand. It took that much to get it here, but because of their commitment to bring 3 key pieces I've never had while working in Latin America, they bought the heart of the mill and put it in containers, and I came down in April, So we made some incredible buys on some precious equipment and just got it hooked up.
So what we'll do, we'll move through the last part here, and then we'll open up for other questions. So other goals or outlooks for 2013, we want to improve our communication with the shareholders. And, you know, we've done that through the Facebook. I'll commit to mailing out an update twice a year to people so they'll know. There's some people that still expect things in the mail. And I got some people interested in this company, and I feel like I need to keep them informed. And it's just so much going on. It's really hard to do, but we're all going to try and do a better job of that this coming year. And then we talked about laying the foundation in order that a cash return on investment can be achieved in 2014 and distributed in 2015. So, you know, maybe it'll turn out better. It will come sooner, but we're expecting that cash is going to start flowing, and at that point, it's going to be a lot of fun. Well, it's already fun. The final slide, I just want to leave you with a value proposition for Panama Teak Forestry. The way I see it, we started here. We started with sustainably managed teak plantations. We did it right. We had to build a core value. From that, we were able to move further out. We could add the value, move up the value-added supply chain with our manufacturing facilities. It's going to be further enhanced with the equipment, the Watkin molder, the flooring, all these different products we can make. And we're going to enhance that through our professional management team. Rod, Mario, Arnaldo, like the people that Rod brought are top-notch in Latin America. To me, that's the most exciting part of our growth. And then through our timber trading company, we haven't talked a lot about that, but we have the ability to export throughout key markets for the teak. And if we could execute on all these fronts, the final result is like when you throw that stone in the water, the largest circle is your profit. And that's what we're hoping is the largest circle in a few more years.
And a little bit on the trading company, what we have done. We went to India and we started an import company there. A Panamanian company can't import food in India. So you actually need a whole network, which we've been starting to structure for. We've got the Indian company started. We actually started an export company in Colombia. We figured that would be the first step. We've also started an import company in the U.S. for importing lumber there. So we won't have middlemen. We will be the end distributor. We'll go from the plantation all the way to the end distribution. And we're actually doing a lot of fundamental changes to the tropical timber industry, which is very fragmented and a lot of one-time, one-shot deals. When you talk to most people in the U.S., they'll tell you they've never had a steady supply of teak. Somebody will bring them, they have a plantation, they harvest it, they supply teak, and then they're gone. You know, so there's nobody who's actually had a really reliable, steady supply. And we spent a lot of time building the overall structure. It takes more time. We're growing the company, and we've always had a long-term point of view and not just a flash in a pan type company.
All right, that brings us to the end of the presentation.
I would like to take a minute to thank you, Grant, very much for the presentation and the work you do. And Jeff, thank you very much. This guy lives down here and is always basically on call and does a lot. I mean, you don't see him very much sometimes, but this guy's been like a rock, and I really appreciate his support. I mean, so I think we should give him a hand. He doesn't always agree with me, but he's been a good partner. And also all the shareholders that have supported us and been patient with us and had faith in us. And Bayless, especially you for doing a wonderful job putting this together. Thank you.
Panamá viejo, ciudad destruida por crueles piratas que un día soñaron con tus tesoros. Tu mar tranquilo parece un espejo en donde se mira tu cielo bello que tanto adoro. Panamá viejo, tus ruinas sagradas en noche callada murmuran frases como plegarias y no muy lejos entre tus palmas me trae la brisa suspiros leves llenos de amor. Panamá viejo, Panamá viejo, soñar que te tengo en mis brazos, que te doy mis caricias con todas las fuerzas de mi corazón. Soñar que me queman tus besos, esos besos ardientes que brindan tus labios en loca pasión. Después, aunque llore tristeza, ¿qué me importa estar solo si me siento feliz? Morir, a mí nada me importa si la muerte me ayuda a soñar con tu amor. Ya no estás más a mi lado, corazón, en el alma solo tengo soledad. Y si ya no puedo verte, porque Dios me hizo quererte para hacerme sufrir más. Siempre fuiste la razón de mi vivir, adorarte para mí fue religión. Y en tus besos yo encontraba el calor que le brindaba el amor y la pasión.